Dead America, Tales from Las Vegas, The Boxer by Derek Slayton. Chapter 1, Day 0, 2:07 a.m. Santiago pulled his car up to the all-night gym on the west side of town, parking at the far end of the lot underneath the only streetlight. The bulb flickered occasionally, casting uneven shadows across the empty pavement. He sat there for a few moments, the hood on his jacket pulled up over his head for warmth. Despite being in the desert, it did get cooler at night this time of year, and he didn't have the money to get the heater in his car fixed. The cold air seeped through the worn fabric of his jacket as he stared at the gym entrance. His hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles showing white even in the dim light. He was psyching himself up for another training session, the same ritual he'd performed dozens of times before. But tonight felt different. Tonight the doubt sat heavier on his shoulders. "Come on, man. You need to get in there and put the work in. You know it's only a matter of time before you get the call for another fight," Santiago said. He winced as he thought back to his last fight, where he got knocked out in the second round with a vicious right hook. The memory played in his head like a highlight reel he couldn't turn off. His opponent had feinted left, then came around with that devastating punch. Santiago hadn't seen it coming until it was too late. The canvas had rushed up to meet him, and then nothing but darkness. He had won his first 4 bouts in convincing fashion, building a reputation as a rising prospect, the kind of fighter promoters took notice of. But that defeat had taken a toll on him, shaken something fundamental in his confidence. It was the first time in his professional career, and really his entire life, where he felt vulnerable, like he could lose. Doubt was a dangerous thing, especially in the ring. "You got this, man. Get back in there," Santiago said. He let out a forceful grunt, giving his steering wheel a light punch before stepping out of the car. The night air hit him immediately, cold enough to make him pull his jacket tighter. Santiago stretched his slim but muscular frame, cracking his back before walking towards the gym. His breath formed small clouds in the air, visible under the streetlight. The gym was a single structure sitting in the middle of the lot, modestly sized and constructed of cinder blocks all the way around. The building had no personality, just function. Practical and plain. The kind of place serious fighters went to work rather than pose. There were a few small skylights, but no real windows outside of the glass front doors. Those doors glowed from the interior lights, beacons in the otherwise dark lot. Santiago walked over to the door, his footsteps echoing across the empty pavement. He pulled out his key card and swiped it on the panel right beside the door, the reader beeping in acknowledgement. He punched in his 4-digit personal number, which triggered the locking mechanism on the door. The metallic click was loud in the quiet night. Despite it being the middle of the night during a weekday, the gym was typically occupied by at least a few people. There were always insomniacs, night shift workers getting in a session before work, or dedicated fighters like himself pushing through fatigue. Tonight, however, there was nothing. The silence was almost deafening as he stepped inside. Nobody working out, no music blaring, just the hum of the fluorescent lights above and the faint smell of rubber mats and disinfectant. "I guess the late-night crew had something better to do than train," Santiago said. His voice sounded too loud in the empty space, bouncing off the walls and equipment. The gym felt different without other people, larger somehow, more isolated. Santiago shook off the feeling and walked over to a heavy bag, dropping his canvas bag on the bench beside it before opening it up. The zipper was stuck as always, requiring a firm tug to get it moving. He shuffled around some stuff, pulling out a bottle of water and some lightweight training gloves. The gloves were worn, the leather soft from countless hours of use. He set them on the bench while continuing to stretch, working through his routine. Arm circles, torso twists, leg swings, getting his muscles warm and ready. Santiago put the gloves on, his fingers finding their familiar positions. The gloves didn't have much in the way of padding, which is the way he liked it. He wanted to feel the impact, know when he was hitting properly. After getting situated, he hit a timer on his phone and began a simple punching routine on the bag to get warmed up. His fists connected with the bag in a steady rhythm. Jab, jab, cross, jab, jab, cross. The bag swung slightly with each impact, the chain holding it creaking. He kept that pace up for a couple of minutes before going into a more intensive routine, delivering multi-punch combinations while bobbing and weaving as if he was dodging invisible punches. Santiago's breathing got heavier as he pushed himself harder. Sweat began forming on his forehead despite the cool air. He imagined an opponent in front of him, saw the openings, threw the combinations. His body moved on instinct, muscle memory taking over. This was where he felt most comfortable, most himself. In the ring or in front of a bag, the world made sense. He kept pushing, building up intensity until he heard his phone alarm ringing, signaling the end of the 3-minute exercise. Santiago walked around a bit, shaking his arms to keep them loose. His chest heaved as he caught his breath, the familiar burn in his muscles welcoming. He stepped back to his phone and hit start again, ready for the next round. Santiago moved over to the bag, going straight into a combination of punches. Jab, jab, hook to the body, uppercut, cross. He mixed up his attacks, throwing jabs and body blows before throwing haymakers. The bag took the punishment, swinging wider now. He was fully in the zone, his mind treating the exercise like an actual round. He could almost hear the crowd, feel the lights, see his opponent across from him. Before his timer went off, however, he was startled by banging on the front door. The sound cut through his focus like a knife, jarring and wrong. At first, he put it out of his mind, trying to deliver more punches. Maybe it was nothing, maybe it would stop. But the banging intensified, becoming more frantic. It wasn't knocking like someone was trying to be let in. It was something more panicked, like someone in distress. Santiago looked over to the door, seeing a figure standing on the other side, smacking against the glass. The figure was small, feminine, and clearly upset. Her hands slapped against the door repeatedly, the sound echoing through the empty gym. Santiago continued staring until his phone alarm went off, the shrill tone pulling him back to reality. He walked over and turned it off while moving towards the door. His guard was up, instincts telling him something was wrong. As he got closer, the woman on the other side took notice of him, her eyes pleading as the banging intensified. Desperation radiated from her. "Please, help me, please!" the woman shouted. Her voice was muffled by the glass, but the terror in it was clear. Santiago picked up his pace, concern overriding caution. "Are you okay?" Santiago called out. The woman continued pleading as Santiago moved to the door, getting within a few yards. As he got close, he could see that she was clearly in distress. Her hair was disheveled, her clothes torn, and she was bleeding from her left arm, the dark stain spreading down to her hand. It didn't look like a cut, more like she had been attacked by a wild animal. The wound was ragged, chunks of flesh missing. Once he saw the blood, he knew he had to help. Santiago picked up the pace over to the door, his fingers finding the lock. Before he could push it open, however, another figure rushed up behind her from the darkness of the parking lot. The impact was jarring, the figure slamming into her back hard enough that her face bounced off the glass violently. The sound of the collision made Santiago flinch. She let out a scream as the attacker sunk its teeth into the nape of her neck, tearing into flesh with savage hunger. "Mother of God," Santiago said. He pushed open the door, trying to get to the woman, who was convulsing as the creature ripped into her neck. Blood sprayed across the glass and door frame, hot and dark. The boxer pulled his arm back, his training taking over. He delivered a forceful blow to the face of the attacking zombie, putting his hips and shoulders into it. The punch connected solidly, the impact enough to release its grip on the woman. Santiago grabbed the woman by her shoulders, pulling her through the door. The combination of the throw and injury caused her to hit the ground hard inside the gym, her body limp. He grabbed the door, trying to pull it shut, but the creature managed to step into the doorway, blocking it. The thing moved fast, faster than Santiago expected. The boxer pulled the door hard, trapping the creature between the door and the frame. The pressure should have hurt it, should have made it back off, but it just kept pushing forward, giving him a moment to get a good look at the ghoul. Its eyes were vacant, lifeless, and staring. No recognition, no humanity, just hunger. Its mouth was bloody as it had a chunk of flesh in its mouth, the woman's flesh. The sight made Santiago's stomach turn. Santiago reacted on instinct, letting go of the door and immediately delivering a forceful punch to the face of the creature. He could hear its nose crack from the impact, bone and cartilage breaking. But it didn't cause the thing to move back, didn't even make it flinch. It just kept pushing forward, arms reaching for him. "Oh, you want more, huh?" Santiago said. He pivoted a bit, planting his back foot and turning his hips to deliver another punch. This one had more power behind it, all of his weight transferring into the blow. The fist cracked the already broken nose again, blood splattering. This time he managed to dislodge the creature from the doorway, the force knocking it back a step. Santiago used the opening, pulling the door closed with both hands. The lock automatically thunked into place, the sound bringing relief. The creature quickly recovered and began smacking against the glass, its bloody hands leaving streaks. Santiago stared at it in disbelief for a moment, his chest heaving. The ghoul's nose was badly disfigured from his punches, flattened and twisted at an unnatural angle. But it seemed unconcerned with what should have been an agonizing injury. It just kept hitting the glass, moaning. "I do not know what kind of drugs you are on, but they must be powerful," Santiago said. He heard coughing coming from behind him, wet and labored. The sound forced him to spin around as he remembered the victim. Santiago's heart dropped as he saw the amount of blood pooling on the floor. He dropped down to one knee beside the injured woman, who was laying in a pool of her own blood. The neck injury was flowing unrestrained, pulsing with each heartbeat. The wound was severe, deeper than he'd initially thought. He could see torn muscle and tissue. Oh my God, Santiago said. He began to panic a bit, his hands shaking. But he forced himself to focus, push down the fear. He reached over to a nearby workbench, grabbing a hand towel that someone had left there. Santiago pressed it against her neck, applying pressure. The towel immediately soaked through, warm and wet. The woman was limp, her eyes struggling to focus. He grabbed her hand and placed it against the towel, wrapping her fingers around it. "Hold this here, I'll call for help," Santiago said. He ran over to his gear, his feet slipping slightly in the blood. Santiago grabbed his phone with shaking hands and dialed 911. He held the phone to his ear, waiting for the ring. It didn't ring, instead emitting a busy signal. The tone was steady and mechanical, offering no hope. "No, come on, you need to ring," Santiago said. He tried again, his thumb jabbing at the screen. Same result. A busy signal. How could 911 be busy? That didn't make sense. Santiago felt panic rising in his chest, threatening to overwhelm him. He turned to look back to the woman, his mind racing, trying to figure out some way to help her. Medical training, first aid, something. As he got her within view, confusion washed over him as he saw her beginning to get back to her feet. She moved stiffly, her limbs jerking. The towel fell away from her neck, revealing the wound still bleeding. No, you need to stay on the ground. Do not overdo it," Santiago said. His words carried across the gym, echoing in the empty space. The only other sound was the zombie at the front door banging against the glass, the impacts constant and rhythmic. Santiago's voice reached the newly turned zombie's ears, causing the woman to turn excitedly in his direction. Her head swiveled, the injury visible and gruesome. Her eyes were different now, vacant like the thing outside, empty. She let out a satisfied moan before racing towards the boxer, her movements fast and predatory. "Oh my God, what are you doing?" Chapter 2. Santiago stared in disbelief at the injured woman standing on her own. Mere moments ago, she didn't have the strength to hold a towel to her injured neck, and now she was on her feet, staring him down. The transformation was impossible, defied everything he understood about the human body. People didn't just get up from injuries like that. They couldn't. The zombified woman let out a horrifying scream before sprinting towards the boxer. The sound was inhuman, filled with rage and hunger. Santiago stood motionless as his brain tried to come to terms with what he was witnessing. This wasn't real. Couldn't be real. His mind scrambled for explanations, anything that made sense. As she got within 2 yards of him, however, survival instinct kicked in. He snapped back into the moment. Santiago darted to the side just as she arrived, his body moving before his mind caught up. Years of training had honed his reflexes, taught him to read movement and react. The woman rushed past him, grabbing nothing but air. Her momentum carried her forward several steps before she could stop. He snapped into boxer mode, staying light on his feet as he focused on the creature. His weight shifted to the balls of his feet, knees bent slightly, ready to move in any direction. He watched her carefully, trying to anticipate its next move. The ghoul spun around, surprisingly nimble for something that should be dying from blood loss. Her movements were jerky, but fast, unnatural. She ran back at him without hesitation, without fear. No strategy, no feints, just raw aggression. Rather than strike, Santiago darted to the side again, his footwork perfect. He pushed the creature on the back shoulder as it raced by, adding to its momentum. The unexpected force caused the zombie to trip over a nearby bench, face planting on the ground with a wet thud. "Just stay down. I do not want to hurt you," Santiago said. His voice carried across the gym, barely loud enough to be heard over the continued banging at the front door. Santiago remained vigilant, his fists still raised in a guard position. He bounced slightly on his feet, ready. He hoped that the zombified woman would take his advice, would just stay down and let him figure this out. Maybe she was sick. Maybe this was some kind of drug-induced psychosis. Maybe there was still a person in there. It quickly became clear to him that he was going to have to do something more substantial than just push her to the ground. The ghoul regained its footing faster than seemed possible, pulling itself up using the bench. She began running at him again, that same mindless charge. No learning, no adaptation. Just attack. "I am very sorry about this," Santiago said. Rather than dart out of the way again, Santiago stood his ground. His stance widened slightly, weight centered. He waited for the creature to get within striking distance, watched it close the gap. At the perfect moment, he delivered a forceful strike to the bridge of the zombie's nose. The punch was textbook, all his weight behind it. His fist connected with a crack that echoed through the empty gym. Like the ghoul banging on the front door, the impact broke the creature's nose. Santiago felt the cartilage give way under his knuckles, but it did nothing to deter the woman. No signs of pain, no reaction at all, no slowing it down, just forcing it a step backwards from the momentum of the blow. The ghoul quickly regained its footing and rushed forward again, arms reaching. Santiago went into full boxing mode, his training taking over completely. Conscious thought fell away, replaced by pure instinct and muscle memory. He delivered a series of forceful strikes to the body and head of the creature, his combinations flowing naturally. Jab to the face, hook to the ribs, uppercut, cross. Every punch broke something. He heard ribs crack, felt facial bones give way beneath his fists. The creature took the punishment but kept coming, kept reaching for him. Finally, Santiago pivoted and delivered a haymaker across the side of its face. He put everything into the punch, his hips rotating, his back foot coming up. The blow landed with devastating force on the woman's jaw. The creature's head snapped violently to the side from the impact, the force too much for the neck to handle. Santiago heard the crack, distinct and sickening. The neck snapped, vertebrae separating. The zombie dropped to the ground like a puppet with its strings cut, limbs splaying out. The body went limp, paralyzed. Despite the gruesome injury cutting off motor function to the limbs, the head was still very much alive and active. Santiago stood over the woman, his chest heaving from exertion. He looked down with confusion and pity as the ghoul snapped its teeth, the jaw working mechanically. Unable to move its head to get within biting distance, it just kept trying. The neck was bent at an unnatural angle, the body motionless. But the eyes tracked him, followed his movement. The mouth kept opening and closing, seeking flesh. "What has happened to you?" Santiago asked. His voice was quiet, almost reverent. This had been a person, someone's daughter, maybe someone's mother. Now she was this thing on the ground, broken and still trying to kill him. Santiago knew he couldn't leave the woman like this. She was suffering in whatever way these things could suffer, but he wasn't sure of what to do. How did you help something like this? He looked around the gym, his eyes scanning the equipment and weights scattered about. Santiago spotted a 30-pound dumbbell that someone had carelessly left laying on the ground near the squat rack. With a heavy heart, he walked over and picked it up. The weight was solid in his hands, the metal cold. He carried it back, holding it over her head. The zombie's eyes locked onto him, the teeth still snapping. "I am so sorry, ma'am," Santiago said. He let the dumbbell go, releasing it from chest height. The weight dropped, accelerating. It cracked into the side of the creature's head with a sound like a melon splitting. The skull caved in under the impact, bone and brain matter compressing. A second later, she fell silent. The snapping stopped, the eyes went blank. The only sounds remaining were the hum of the lights above, and the agitated creature by the front door still beating against the glass. The boxer stared at the woman on the ground in disbelief, his hands shaking from what had just occurred. His whole body began trembling, adrenaline flooding his system with nowhere to go. He zoned out, staring at her as different emotions fought for dominance. Shock, fear, guilt. Then the rage built inside him, pushing everything else aside. The sound coming from the front door grew louder in his mind, as the creature that had done that to her continued to smack against the glass. This was its fault. That thing had attacked her, turned her into this. "Oh, you stay right there, partner. I bet you felt like a big man attacking a young woman like that. Let's see how you handle taking on someone who can fight back," Santiago said. His voice carried menace, low and dangerous. Santiago began stretching a bit, rolling his shoulders and shaking his arms out like he was getting ready to work the bag again. Loosening up, preparing his body for another fight. Only instead of walking over to the workout area, he moved towards the door. His stride was purposeful, controlled. A predator approaching prey. His face wore the expression of a man possessed by rage, fire dancing in his eyes as he locked onto the zombie on the other side of the glass. The creature saw him coming, its movements becoming more frantic. Hands slapped against the door faster, the moaning intensifying. Most people would be terrified by the ghoul desperately trying to break in. But not Santiago. He was ready to put the creature in its place, ready to make it pay. The boxer stopped on the other side of the glass, getting within a few inches. Nose to nose with the ghoul on the other side, only the door between them. He stared it down, trying to get a read on if anything was going on inside its head, looking for some spark of intelligence, some recognition. But he saw nothing but a vacant stare coming back his way. Empty eyes that reflected no thought, no humanity, just hunger. "That doesn't surprise me, as a smart man would have ran as far away from me as they possibly could," Santiago said. He reached down to the lock, his fingers finding the mechanism. The metallic click as he flicked it open seemed loud in the quiet gym. The zombie on the other side seemed to sense the change, its attacks becoming more violent. "And I'm about to show you why," Santiago said. The boxer pushed the door open, stepping back as he did. He allowed the zombie on the other side to get a handhold on it. The creature grabbed the edge and pulled, yanking the door wide. Its strength was surprising, unnatural. The door swung open fully and clicked shut behind the zombie as it entered, sealing them in together. Santiago backed up a couple of steps so that he had room to work. He needed space to move, to use his footwork. The ghoul rushed inside immediately, no hesitation. It came straight towards the boxer, arms extended and grasping. Santiago stood his ground, getting a slight grin on his face as the battle was about to begin. This was what he knew. This was his arena. Santiago skipped over the light punches, the jabs, and feeling out strikes. He went straight for the haymakers as soon as the ghoul got within reach. His first punch caught the zombie on the cheek, all of his power channeled into the blow. The impact broke several bones in its face, the structure collapsing. The force was enough that it sent the ghoul stumbling to the side, its feet tangling. The boxer danced around to the rear of the creature as it staggered back up, using his footwork to maintain position. The zombie looked around frantically for his prey, its head swiveling. "I'm over here," Santiago called out. As the ghoul turned around, the boxer darted forward. He was already throwing before the creature fully faced him. Santiago delivered several more forceful strikes to the zombie's face, driving it backwards with each impact. The combinations came naturally, each punch setting up the next. One punch broke what remained of the zombie's nose, cartilage flattening completely. The next fractured the orbital bone, the eye socket caving inward, and the next unhinged its jaw, the mandible separating with a pop. Despite the constant strikes, despite the damage accumulating with each blow, the zombie remained upright. That only enraged the boxer more. Nothing should be able to take this kind of punishment and keep standing. Nothing human. Santiago let out rage-filled screams as he delivered a flurry of blows, each one cracking more bones. His fists became pistons, mechanical and relentless. The zombie's face deformed under the assault, features becoming unrecognizable. Finally, the boxer had enough of the creature staying on its feet. He rushed forward and grabbed the zombie by the shirt with both hands, fabric bunching in his fists. Santiago lifted it up off its feet with pure strength fueled by adrenaline. He drove the creature into the ground, slamming it down onto the rubber mat. The impact forced air from the zombie's lungs in a wet wheeze. Santiago pounced onto the top of the zombie, straddling its chest. He went into a blind rage, the world narrowing to just him and the thing beneath him. He delivered another flurry of blows, fists rising and falling. But he didn't feel it. Didn't feel anything except rage. Finally, after a solid minute of punching, the creature fell limp. The brain had been damaged enough to end the threat, the skull fractured and leaking. The boxer delivered a couple more punches before he realized the zombie had stopped moving. The rage started to drain away, leaving exhaustion in its wake. Santiago breathed heavily, staring down at the lifeless creature beneath him. Its face was a mess, barely recognizable as having been human. No swelling, but it was deformed due to the broken bones. The skin was torn in places, revealing the damage underneath. Santiago pulled himself up, his legs shaky. He was still breathing heavily from the exertion, his lungs burning. Sweat dripped down his face, mixing with blood splatter. As the rage began to subside, reality began to creep back in. The gym came back into focus, the lights seeming too bright. He looked at his fists, seeing them covered in blood. They were stinging from the impacts, the pain finally registering. "I better get some ice on you boys," Santiago said. His voice sounded distant to his own ears, disconnected. Santiago began walking towards the refrigerator near the back of the gym where they kept ice packs for injuries. His gait was unsteady, adrenaline crash setting in. He had only taken a few steps when he heard the squealing of tires coming from the front. The sound was loud even through the walls, rubber burning on asphalt. It was followed shortly thereafter by a crash, the distinctive crunch of metal and glass. The boxer ran to the front of the gym, his exhaustion forgotten. He looked out towards the parking lot through the glass doors. Santiago muttered curses under his breath as he saw another car had crashed into his under the streetlight. The collision had been hard, both vehicles crumpled. Steam rose from at least one of the hoods, visible in the flickering streetlight. His beat-up car was now totaled, the final insult to an already terrible night. The anger he normally would have felt at seeing his beat-up car taking a fatal blow was replaced by something else. Fear. Cold and sharp in his gut. 4 zombies swarmed around the wreck, all of them trying to get at whoever was in the other vehicle. They clawed at the windows, pulled on the doors. Their moaning was audible even from inside the gym. Santiago stared for a moment, trying to see inside the wrecked car. The windshield was cracked, making it hard to make out details. His eyes went wide when he saw 2 people inside, moving slowly. They were clearly hurting from the wreck, their movements sluggish and pained. "It looks like your workout is not over yet." Chapter 3. Santiago looked out towards the wreckage, watching the 4 zombies clamoring to get inside. They surrounded the crashed vehicle like sharks circling prey, their hands slapping against the windows and pulling at the door handles. The 2 people in the car were dazed, their movements slow and uncoordinated. One of them, a younger woman in the passenger seat, looked over to the gym. Her eyes went wide when she spotted him standing in the doorway. She waved slightly, the gesture weak but desperate. Relief washed across her face when she saw the boxer waving back at her. Santiago gave her a hand motion to stay put, palm out in a stopping gesture. Help was coming, even if he didn't exactly know how yet. The woman nodded, understanding, and turned to say something to the driver. "You are going to need something more than just your fists." "Those people can take a beating," Santiago said. He'd learned that lesson already tonight. His hands were still throbbing from the 2 zombies he'd put down inside. Going out there with just his fists was asking to get hurt, or worse. Santiago looked around the front entrance of the gym, hoping to spot something that could help him out. His eyes scanned the area, moving over benches and water fountains and bulletin boards. Then he spotted something useful: bike locks. A lot of the people who used the gym were like him, not the wealthiest of people. The gym catered to fighters and working-class folks, not the wealthy tourists who filled the strip. While he was fortunate enough to own a car, even if it was now totaled, a lot of the others weren't. They used what they could get their hands on, which most of the time meant riding bikes. The bike rack outside was always full during peak hours. After a couple bikes were stolen over the summer, the gym's owner picked up a few bike locks at a swap meet so that his people could lock up their most prized possessions. The locks hung on hooks by the door, available for anyone who needed them. Tonight, however, they were going to be used in an unintended way. Santiago grabbed one of them, examining it in his hands. The chain wasn't overly thick, maybe a 1/4 inch of hardened steel links, but it was incredibly sturdy, designed to withstand bolt cutters. Santiago wrapped it around one of his fists, the metal cool against his torn skin. He gave it a light tap against the wooden wall by the door, testing the weight and feel. The impact was solid, the chain adding mass and protection to his punch. He nodded at the result, satisfied. "This is going to do the trick," Santiago said. The boxer grabbed another chain from the hook, wrapping it around his other hand. The locks themselves he left hanging, the extra weight would throw off his balance. Just the chains, creating makeshift brass knuckles. Santiago stepped to the door, his hand reaching for the handle. Before he exited, a thought hit him. If the door shut, it was going to lock automatically. The mechanism would engage, sealing him out. He didn't want to have to fumble around with a key card and code to get back in, especially if those things were giving chase. Seconds could mean the difference between safety and being torn apart. Santiago grabbed the door block brick sitting by the front entrance, the one that the staff would use to prop open the door during the winter months to save on air conditioning costs. The brick was heavy, solid concrete. He positioned it carefully, making sure it would hold. The door stayed open, a gap of maybe 6 inches, enough to slip through quickly but not so wide that the zombies would notice it immediately. The boxer stepped outside into the cool night air, the temperature a shock after the heated battle inside. He moved quietly across the pavement, not wanting to alert the creatures to his presence just yet. Santiago wanted to make sure it was just these 4 out here, and not a horde of them hiding in the darkness beyond the streetlight's reach. The parking lot stretched into shadow on all sides. Any number of threats could be lurking out there. He scanned the darkness, his eyes adjusting to the dimmer light. The streetlight flickered overhead, creating pools of light and shadow. Santiago watched for movement, listened for moans. But he heard nothing except the 4 zombies at the car, saw nothing moving in the darkness. Once he was convinced he was alone with them, he stopped, positioning himself 10 yards from the wreck. The 4 creatures were intently focused on the people trapped inside the car, none of them taking notice of him. They clawed at the windows, the glass spider webbing under the assault, but holding, for now. The driver's side window had been partially rolled down, giving the zombies something to grip. One of them had its arm through the gap, reaching inside. The driver was pressed back against the passenger seat, trying to stay out of reach. Santiago contemplated for a moment, thinking about running up behind them. He could probably take one down before the others noticed, but he knew that was a recipe for disaster. They'd swarm him, all 4 at once. Even with the chains, those odds weren't good. He needed them spread out if he was to have any chance of taking them out. Divide and conquer. The boxer looked to the ground, scanning the pavement. His eyes found an empty beer bottle that someone had left behind, probably tossed from a passing car. The glass caught the streetlight, making it easy to spot. Santiago picked it up, the bottle still sticky with the residue of cheap beer. He hefted it, judging the weight, then threw it towards the back of the nearest zombie. The bottle hit the ghoul in the back with a dull thunk, bouncing off and shattering on the pavement. The zombie's head turned, looking for the source of the impact. It let out a satisfied moan when it spotted Santiago standing in the open. The sound got the attention of a second creature, its head swiveling toward the boxer. Both zombies broke from the car, abandoning their trapped prey for easier meat. They sprinted toward Santiago as quickly as they could, their movements uncoordinated but fast. Santiago stood his ground, his stance widening slightly. He sized up his opponents as they got closer, watching their movements and speed. The lead creature was a few steps ahead of the other one, moving at a faster clip. It had been a man, middle-aged, wearing work clothes. A delivery driver, maybe, or a construction worker. Its face was pale in the streetlight, eyes vacant and mouth hanging open. Rather than engage the leader head-on, Santiago stepped to the side at the last second. His footwork was perfect, honed by years in the ring. He extended his leg as the zombie rushed past, catching it at the ankle. The creature had no chance to adjust, no ability to compensate. It slammed face first into the ground, the impact hard enough to split its lip. Not that it seemed to notice or care. As the first zombie hit the pavement, the boxer planted his feet firmly on the asphalt. His back foot anchored, his hips rotated. Santiago thrust his arm forward as hard as he could, meeting the second zombie as it arrived. The chain-wrapped fist cracked into the face of the creature with devastating force. The metal links connected with the bridge of its nose, crushing bone. The impact was so solid, it nearly lifted the zombie off its feet, its momentum completely arrested. The ghoul fell backwards to the ground, arms windmilling. Santiago didn't waste any time, dropping to one knee beside it. He punched it full force in the forehead, the chain-wrapped fist coming down like a hammer, once, twice. The chain-enhanced fist did the trick, cracking the skull in just 2 blows. He felt the bone give way on the second impact, the structure collapsing. His fist punched through into softer tissue beneath. The zombie convulsed on the ground for a moment, its limbs jerking. The brain was giving out the last few impulses, synapses misfiring as it died for the second time. Then it fell quiet, going still. The vacant eyes stared up at nothing, no longer tracking movement. Santiago didn't have time to savor his victory. He heard the first zombie scrambling to its feet behind him, heard the scrape of clothing on asphalt. The boxer launched himself up, his legs driving him upright. He got into a fighting stance just as the creature arrived, its arms reaching for him. Santiago's hands came up, chains ready. The ghoul managed to grab onto his arm before he could strike, its fingers locking around his forearm. Cold and strong, the grip was like iron. It tried to pull his arm in for a bite, yanking him forward, but the boxer used his free hand to crack it in the side of the head, the chain-wrapped fist coming around in a wide arc. The impact was brutal, hitting the temple full force. One chain link delivered a direct hit to the thin bone there, punching through. The lights inside the creature's head were instantly turned out, its brain destroyed. The zombie collapsed to the ground in a heap, the fingers releasing their grip. Santiago's arm was free, red marks where the creature had grabbed him, but no broken skin. He stood over it for a moment, chest heaving. His breath came in clouds in the cool air. Santiago stared down to make sure it was down for the count, watching for any movement. The body remained still, lifeless. Once he was satisfied, he turned his attention to the 2 remaining creatures by the car. Both of them had their backs turned to him, oblivious to the fact that their companions were down. They were nearly shoulder to shoulder, both trying to reach through the driver's window. The gap wasn't large enough for them to get more than an arm through, but they kept trying anyway. Mindless persistence. Santiago thought about it for a moment, considering his options. He cursed himself that he hadn't taken one of his sparring partners up on doing some MMA cross-training. If he knew how to grapple, this would be easier. But he was a boxer through and through, had never trained in anything else. He'd have to make it work with what he knew. Santiago decided on his course of action, even if it was risky. He moved silently up to the car, his boots carefully placed to avoid glass and debris. The zombies were making enough noise that they wouldn't hear him anyway, their moaning and clawing drowning out other sounds. He positioned himself right behind one of the zombies, close enough to touch. The creature was oblivious to his presence, entirely focused on the prey inside the vehicle. In a flash, Santiago reached out, grabbing onto the ghoul by the back of the bloody shirt. His fingers found purchase in the fabric, gripping tight. He yanked it back and to the side, using the zombie's own momentum against it. The creature stumbled, caught off guard. Before it could recover, Santiago drove it forward into the back of the other zombie, pinning them both against the car. He planted his feet firmly in the ground, his legs spread wide for stability. His arm pressed into the back of the front zombie, holding it in place as he began delivering strikes to the side of its head. Both zombies flailed about, trying to break free. Their arms waved uselessly, unable to reach him from their position. They were excited at the presence of a fresh meal so close, but agitated that they couldn't move. The moaning intensified, turning to frustrated screams. The boxer let out grunts with every punch, putting as much force behind them as he could. His chain-wrapped fist rose and fell repeatedly, each impact creating sickening sounds. The back of the skull on the rear zombie began to crack after several blows. Santiago felt the bone softening, giving way under the repeated trauma. Finally, it caved in completely, his fist punching through. The ghoul fell limp immediately, the dead weight too much for the boxer to keep a grip on. The body slid down the side of the car, freeing the other zombie from its haphazard captivity. The remaining ghoul spun around fast, its movements jerky but quick. It lunged for the boxer, arms extended and fingers grasping. Santiago deftly avoided being grabbed, his footwork keeping him just out of reach. He backed up a couple of steps, staying in a fight stance. His knees were bent, weight balanced. The zombie stumbled over its fallen partner, the body creating an obstacle. Its feet tangled in the limbs, nearly causing it to fall. The ghoul finally got back upright, recovering its balance. It rushed over to Santiago, who was ready. The boxer unleashed a devastating series of blows to the zombie's head, not giving it a chance to grab him. Haymaker after haymaker, each punch powered by his legs and core. The chains added weight and force to every strike, cracking bones with each impact. The zombie's skull deformed under the assault, fractures spreading across the bone. Finally, the creature dropped to the ground, its brain too damaged to continue functioning. Santiago knelt down beside it, his knee pressing into its back. He delivered one more forceful strike to the back of its head for good measure, making sure it stayed down. The skull caved in completely under the blow, the chain punching through. Santiago stood back up, his legs shaky from exertion. He looked around the parking lot for signs of trouble, scanning the darkness beyond the streetlight. But he found none. No movement, no moans, just the 4 bodies on the ground and the 2 people trapped in the wrecked car. He turned toward the vehicle and motioned to the door, waving for the people to come out. His gesture was urgent but controlled. "Come on, we have to get inside." Chapter 4. The young woman opened up the car door, her hands fumbling with the handle. She nearly fell to the ground as her legs betrayed her, the shock and adrenaline making her muscles weak. She caught herself on the doorframe, steadying herself. The woman was bleeding from the head, a nasty gash above her right eyebrow the source. Blood ran down the side of her face, dripping from her chin onto her shirt. Santiago stepped over quickly, reaching out and helping her back to her feet. His hand found her elbow, supporting her weight. She was young, maybe early 20s, with dark hair and terrified eyes. "Please, my father, he needs help," the woman said. Her voice was shaky, barely holding together. Before Santiago could move toward the driver's side, he heard moaning and footsteps coming from the street. The sounds were distant but approaching, maybe 40 yards away. He glanced over, his body tensing. 3 zombies were running down the street at full sprint, their forms visible under the streetlights. But they were focused on something else, chasing prey Santiago couldn't see. The woman began to panic, her breathing quickening. She opened her mouth to speak, probably to scream. Santiago stepped over quickly and wrapped his hand around her mouth, firm but not rough. He kept a tight hold on her for a few moments, his other hand coming up in a gesture for silence. They both stood frozen, watching the creatures. The zombies ran past the parking lot entrance, disappearing into the darkness beyond. Their moans faded, growing fainter until they vanished completely. "Stay very quiet and help me with your father," Santiago said. His voice was barely above a whisper. The woman nodded against his hand, understanding. Santiago released her, and they both ran around to the driver's side door. The woman pulled the handle and yanked the door open, the hinges creaking. The man inside was about 30 years older than the woman, maybe in his 50s, gray hair, weathered face, the kind of man who worked with his hands. He was also bleeding profusely from the head, a gash on his forehead where he'd struck the steering wheel. The airbag hadn't deployed, leaving him exposed to the impact. He was dazed, his eyes struggling to focus. "Sir, can you walk?" Santiago asked. The man blinked a few times, trying to clear his head. He looked at Santiago, then at his daughter. Recognition slowly returned to his eyes. "Yeah, if you can get me out of here," the man said. His words were slightly slurred, speech affected by the head injury. The man tugged at his seatbelt with clumsy fingers, but the mechanism didn't want to give way. The crash had jammed it somehow, the release button not responding. Santiago reached inside, his fingers finding the buckle. He struggled with it for a moment, applying pressure from different angles. Finally, it clicked and released. Once freed from the restraint, the man slumped forward inadvertently. His hand came down on the steering wheel, landing directly on the horn. The sound blared out across the parking lot, loud and piercing in the quiet night. A beacon announcing their location to every zombie within earshot. "We have to go now," Santiago said. His voice carried urgency, but not panic. Santiago grabbed the man by the arm, yanking him from the car. The motion was rougher than he'd intended, but necessary. He pulled the injured man to his feet, supporting most of his weight. The man's legs were unsteady, barely holding him up. His daughter quickly moved to his other side, taking his arm and draping it around her shoulders for support. The three of them began moving quickly towards the gym as the sounds of excited moans and footsteps erupted in the darkness behind them. The horn had done exactly what Santiago feared, drawing every zombie in the area. The moaning grew louder, closer, multiple voices joining together in that hungry chorus. They moved as swiftly as they could manage, the injured man between them slowing their pace. His feet dragged slightly, each step an effort. They got within 15 yards of the gym before the boxer looked back over his shoulder. Half a dozen zombies were closing in on them, emerging from the darkness like apparitions. They moved at a fast enough pace that it was clear they weren't going to make it inside unless Santiago did something. The math was simple and terrible. The zombies were faster, and they had less distance to cover. He made his decision in an instant and yelled out, "Get him inside and do not lock me out," Santiago shouted. He ducked out from underneath the man's arm, forcing the daughter to take the full weight. She nearly collapsed under the sudden load, her knees buckling, but she managed to stay upright, her arm tightening around her father's waist. She took a stumbling step forward, then another, pulling him toward the gym. The man tried to help, his feet moving but barely supporting his own weight. The boxer turned and stood his ground, planting his feet on the asphalt. He got the creatures in view, counting them quickly. 6 total, all moving fast. He took a breath, centering himself. In a flash, he darted forward towards the nearest creature, closing the distance before it expected. Santiago swung his chain-wrapped fist as hard as he could, putting everything into the punch. The blow connected with the zombie's nose, crushing it flat. The force of the impact, combined with the creature's own momentum, created a physics problem it couldn't solve. The sudden shift caused the zombie to fall backwards to the ground, its feet going out from under it. The creature hit the pavement hard, arms flailing. Rather than stop and deliver a killing shot, the boxer continued moving forward. He threw wild haymakers at the next zombie in line, his fists a blur. Santiago knew that he didn't need to end the threat, only delay it long enough for the father and daughter to reach the gym safely. The boxer danced around like he was in the middle of the ring in front of an adoring crowd. He was fully in his element, muscle memory and years of training taking over. Ducking around every grasp, slipping punches that would have connected with a living opponent. Moving out of trouble as soon as he felt something touch his shoulder, never letting them get a solid grip. And delivering forceful punch after forceful punch, each one buying him another second. Santiago managed to knock down 3 zombies with relative ease, his combinations flowing naturally. The fallen creatures created a minefield of bodies in the middle of the battle area, obstacles that the other zombies had to navigate. He moved in for another punch, targeting the jaw of the next zombie. The chain-wrapped fist hit with devastating force, shattering the bone. Teeth clattered down to the asphalt, bouncing and skittering across the pavement. His constant stream of dodges and punches was interrupted by the young woman letting out a sharp whistle from the front door. The sound cut through the moaning and the sound of his own heavy breathing. Santiago didn't bother to look back for confirmation of what the whistle meant. He trusted it completely. Instead, he turned and ran, pivoting on one foot and sprinting toward the gym, putting his full trust into someone whose name he didn't even know. The zombies were left staggered in his wake, most of them struggling to get back to their feet. The others were tripping over their fallen companions, unable to maintain their pursuit. The chaos Santiago had created gave him just enough of an opening to put some distance between them. His legs pumped hard, boots pounding on the asphalt. Santiago ran through the door, his shoulder hitting the frame as he barreled inside. The young woman pulled it closed behind him immediately, her hands finding the door and slamming it shut. The lock clicked into place with that familiar thunk. The three of them stood by the front door, chests heaving. They watched as the zombies eventually made it over, recovering from Santiago's assault. The ghouls smacked against the glass, their bloody hands smearing across the surface. Fingers scraped at the edges, looking for purchase. They were desperate to get inside, to reach the living flesh just out of reach. "Do not worry, they will not be able to get inside," Santiago said. His voice was steady despite his heavy breathing, projecting confidence he hoped was justified. The boxer grabbed onto the father, his hand finding the man's arm. He helped him away from the door, supporting his weight. They moved deeper into the gym, getting them behind a short wall that separated the entrance from the main workout area. Santiago carefully lowered the man to the ground, easing him down so he was sitting with his back against the wall. "I will get you something for the blood and the pain," Santiago said. The woman knelt beside her father, her hand finding his. She looked up at Santiago, gratitude mixing with desperation in her eyes. "And I'm sorry to ask, because you've done so much for us already, but I am so thirsty," the woman said. Her voice cracked slightly on the words. The boxer smiled, giving her a nod. These were simple requests, easy to fulfill. "I shall bring you some water as well," Santiago said. The young woman nodded as she took a seat beside her father, settling in next to him. The man's eyes were closed now, his breathing steady, resting but conscious. The boxer walked towards the back of the gym, his footsteps echoing in the space. The moaning from outside was constant but muffled background noise. He headed for the small kitchen area where the med kit sat on a shelf. As Santiago reached out for the first aid kit, his eyes spotted a small radio sitting on the counter. The device was old, probably from the 90s, with an extendable antenna and worn buttons. One of the staff members must have left it there during a shift. "Maybe there is something on the news about all this," Santiago said. He spoke to himself, the words helping organize his thoughts. The boxer flipped the radio on, his thumb finding the power button. Static came first, then music as the station came through. The ending guitar licks of an 80s metal anthem filled the room, loud and familiar. Santiago turned the volume down slightly, not wanting to draw attention from outside. As he began to pack up a plastic bag with ice from the freezer, the DJ's voice came through the speakers. "Oh man, that is a classic," Midnight Mike said. His voice was energetic, the practiced enthusiasm of someone who loved their job. "You are rocking through the night with Midnight Mike, who will carry you straight on until the break of dawn. Now, let's take a call before we get back to the tunes. Talk to me, Las Vegas. How's it going out there tonight?" Midnight Mike asked. A man's voice came over the radio, the audio quality suggesting a cell phone connection. "Hey Mike, you won't believe what I just saw," the caller said. The man sounded excited, like he was bursting to share a story. Midnight Mike played into it, his voice shifting to match the caller's energy. "Well, don't keep me in suspense." "Lay it on me, man," Midnight Mike said. The caller took a breath, then launched into his tale. "This crazy guy apparently had a few too many and bit a stripper," the caller said. There was a pause as Midnight Mike processed that information. When he responded, his tone carried amused disbelief. "I've lived here for years, and that's a new one on me," Midnight Mike said. The caller chuckled, clearly pleased with the DJ's reaction. "Given what the bouncer did to them, I think it was a new one on them as well," the caller said. "There's always something new here in Vegas. So, what say you faithful listeners? Anybody else having a crazy night out there?" Midnight Mike asked. Santiago stared at the radio, his hands frozen on the ice pack he'd been preparing. The caller's story played through his mind, connecting to what he'd witnessed. A bite. Just like the woman at the door. Just like what created the zombie he'd put down inside. "You have no idea, Mike. You have no idea," Santiago said. His voice was quiet, almost reverent. The DJ couldn't hear him, but Santiago spoke anyway. He tuned out the radio as the next song came on, some rock anthem from decades past. The music became background noise as his mind worked. Santiago grabbed the ice pack and the bottle of ibuprofen from the shelf, moving on autopilot. He paused in the doorway of the kitchen, his eyes looking back to the radio. A terrible thought filled his head, cold and certain. Whatever had happened at the gym, whatever had turned that woman into a monster, was happening elsewhere in Las Vegas. The end.